Okay, so welcome everyone to Belmont Poetry Night. My name is Jacki Rigoni. I am the Poet Laureate of Belmont, California, which I also acknowledge as unceded Ohlone land. Belmont Poetry Night is hosted on the third Tuesday of every month at the Belmont Library in California. Since shelter in place, we've moved to Zoom, which allowed us to make this opportunity available beyond our town of Belmont. So that's really exciting. Our featured poet tonight, I wanted to let you know that the agenda, our featured poet tonight, Michael Warr, will read about 20 to 25 minutes of poems. It'll be followed by a short Q&A and then open mic. And several folks have emailed me to volunteer to read on the theme of justice as they interpret it. We do have a full roster and time for one poem each. I'll put the reading order in the comments. And if you emailed me and you're not on the list, just go ahead and let me know in the chat. Otherwise, just sit back and take in all our amazing featured poet offers to us this evening. Couple more notes. Since everyone but the person speaking will be on mute, you can also show your appreciation by using the American Sign Language sign for applause. And you can use that generously. I also invite you to join the conversation in the chat box on the right-hand side, where you can show your gratitude. And my favorite way to do that is by typing in a line or a phrase from the poem that's being read that especially speaks to you. I'm so glad you're all here, and you can practice using the chat right now if you'd like by typing in where you're from. Okay. Oh, we got Oaktown, yeah. Richmond, Emerald Hills, yay, Petaluma, Palo Alto, in Belmont represent. Campbell, great, Foster City, Vallejo, yay, which is so amazing that we can join all together here. Thank you. I got Half Moon Bay, Dayton, Ohio, awesome, Brooklyn, hi Molly, thank you. Wow, this is just amazing. I think actually Brooklyn is the furthest visitor for Belmont Poetry Night. San Mateo and more Belmont, great, excellent, great to see you all. Let's see, Catherine, I see your hand up. If you want to go ahead and type in the chat, that'd be great for whatever you need. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce our featured poet. Okay, so tonight we celebrate Pride Month and yesterday's landmark Supreme Court decision that protects gay, lesbian, and transgender employees from being disciplined, fired, or turned down for a job based on their sexual orientation. I personally look forward to the time when there is no need for Pride Month, or Women's History Month, or Black History Month, because we live them every month of the year. And while we celebrate the wins for our mutual liberation, we also acknowledge that there is a reason the world has the murder of accept nothing less than a fully lived reality that Black Lives Matter. What does poetry have to do with that? Well, for me, everything. The poet Kwame Dawes says that poetry teaches me how to make this lisping, stammering tongue of mine pray, preach, lament, bear witness, praise, adore, abuse, and voice the discoveries that I make about the complexities of living in this world. I am not a political poet, because to say I am a political poet would limit both what poetry is and what politics is. I am a political being. I make poems. My poems never ignore who I am, and my poems help me to understand who I am. That's poet Kwame Dawes, and it comes from the book of poetry and protest from Emmett Till to Trayvon Martin, and it's edited by our featured poet, Michael Warr. I can't really express how honored and privileged I am to introduce him to you tonight. Michael Warr's books include Of Poetry and Protest from Emmett Till to Trayvon Martin from W.W. Norton, The Armageddon of Funk, We Are All the Black Boy, and Power Lines, a decade of poetry from Chicago's Guild Complex. In 2017, he was named a San Francisco Library Laureate. Other honors of his include a Creative Work Fund Award for his multimedia project, Tracing Poetic Memory in Bayview Hunters Point, Penn Oakland Josephine Miles Award for Excellence in Literature, Black Caucus of the American Library Association Award, Gwendolyn Brooks Significant Illinois Poets Award, and a National Endowment for the Arts Fellowship. His poetry is translated into Mandarin as part of his Two Languages, One Community project in collaboration with poet and translator Chun Yu. Michael is the former deputy director of the Museum of the African Diaspora and a board member of the Friends of the San Francisco Public Library. Michael, welcome.
Thank you, Jackie. It's so good to be here. It's great to see so many of my friends' names flashing across the screen. And I want to thank you for inviting me, and also thank all of you who have shown up for this. Support poetry, keep getting on those Zooms as long as we have to Zoom, as opposed to showing up, on site. So I have to also just give props, because the first image that you're seeing on the screen, which is in the book, was created by artist Chris Kohler, and that is his depiction of Trayvon Martin, and it's titled Hoodie. And the book is, okay, I just lost my, sorry, I have to change the, sorry, Jackie? Okay. Yeah, okay, because I lost.
So actually, when I share screen, you'll lose it. So just hit escape like we did.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna.
Okay, sorry about that. So I want to I was thanking Chris Kohler for this wonderful image of Trayvon Martin, which is Hoodie, and there's art like this throughout the book, and that's one of the great things about it. So I want to give a little bit of background about the book of Poetry and Protest. The full title is Of Poetry and Protest from Emmett Till to Trayvon Martin. And as you can see in this next image, that the environment that this book evolved out of is captured by the emergence of the Black Lives Matters movement. And I want to share some of the words of my partner in this book, the guy who started the whole thing and who acted as the publisher, and that's Phil Cushwaite. And you'll see his name there under where it says Of Poetry and Protest from Emmett Till to Trayvon Martin. If you look at this next image, Black Lives Matters, you could see that this book emerged out of this time, and when there were struggle in the streets. And this is the way Phil referred to it in his preface to the book. It was 2013 when I started this book, and a new iteration of the civil rights movement was taking place. From the streets of Ferguson, Cleveland, Baltimore, and across the country, young people marched, questioning and confronting the continued murders of Black youth. Oscar Grant, Tamir Rice, and Trayvon Martin became today's Emmett Till. The protesters' placards bearing the words, "Hands up, don't shoot, and I can't breathe," were distilled down to the root of it all. Black Lives Matter. As events in cities and towns escalated and the protest became more visible, the book and the messages of the poets began to take on a new urgency. So this collection emerged out of that situation. And to me, this image that you're looking at now, it captures the passion, the hope, the strategizing, the commitment, and the mobilizing that led to this mass movement to stop unjust police killings against the unarmed that we're witnessing today and participating in today on the streets. And in my introduction of Poetry and Protest, I'm just gonna read a little bit from that about the way I saw this book and still see this book. I wrote, I think of this book as a singular tool in a toolbox of many tools that will be lifted up to help fix what ails America. It is my intention to reflect a universe in which it is impossible for poets and poetry to exist in a social vacuum. Ultimately, there is no protective divide between the acts of the poet and the acts of the society and systems in which they create. The frequently automated brutality, unrelenting inequality, and senseless, unjustified, amoral police killings confront and endanger each of us in some way at some point. This book is as much a call to action as it is a call to embrace the relevance and humanity of its creative content. And so as we prepared for this book to go into production in 2005, that is what I wrote. The next slide gives a sense of, it shows all the poets who are in this book. And that collection of poets, including Kwame Doss, who Jacki read earlier, who's on page 40, by the way, the poets who are in this book, they contributed, their contribution not only reflects these literary voices that are committed to social transformation, but they also reflect a cross-generational commitment to the struggle for freedom and justice. And the mass mobilizations and change that we're witnessing today while being led by youth have to also be understood as a continuum across the generations. And that's one of the things that's reflected in this book. A few of the poets in it, in this collection, were my literary heroes as a child. And so one of those is Amiri Baraka. And I speak also in the book of Gwendolyn Brooks, who, she's not in the book because we were featuring living poets, but the vast majority of the poets in this book, despite being cross-generational, most of them cited her as one of their major influences. And you'll see that when you read what I call the I statements, which are the short biographical statements that the poets wrote. I chose not to include myself in these pages because there are so many poets who deserve to be in this book because of the format of the book with archival materials, photographs. We couldn't get more than 50 poets in the book. And so I knew I would have an introduction to be able to say my piece there. But there's a story behind this that I want to address in the next slide. So here we are in the study of Amiri Baraka and Amina Baraka. And it wasn't until the book was just about to come out that I noticed, looking at this photograph, that there's a stack of papers, and on top of those papers is a book. And it's my book. It's one of my books. It's called The Armageddon of Funk. So it's kind of like poetic justice, you know. And I think that from looking at the way those papers in the book is lying there, it looks like it was staged. It looks like they actually put the book there. So there's a lot of stories like that behind this book. And with that kind of overview of Poetry and Protest from Emmett Till to Trayvon Martin, I want to now move into a little bit of poetry. I told you I intentionally didn't put my own poetry in the book, but I'm going to share one of my poems right now that it's called What Not to Do. We can move to the next slide. And this slide is just showing like a collection just a small series of the names of people who have been killed who were unarmed by the police. And this poem, What Not to Do, is a poem. It's called What Not to Do, an unfinished poem. The reason it's called unfinished is because the killings continue. And I'm going to continue working on this until they stop. And unfortunately, I think that means I'll be writing them the rest of my life, but hope is, reigns eternal. So this is a poem, as I said, about police killings of the unarmed. I've been adding names to this poem since 2018. I don't add all the names, but I'm very kind of looking at the case and deciding which names to add to it. If I was to read the entire poem, it would take 10 minutes. So I'm just going to read excerpts from it. When writing this poem, I wasn't sure actually that it was a poem, and that didn't matter to me. What mattered was the message that I wanted to make as creatively as possible. And then it was selected as a runner-up in the Nimrod's Pablo Neruda Awards. And at that point, I said, okay, it must be a poem. And I made up a form or structure that carries throughout the poem. And that's the slide that you're looking at right now. The reason I put this up there is so that you can get a little bit of sense of the structure of the poem. And I'm just going to read this to you before sharing some of the poems from the anthology. What Not to Do, an unfinished poem. Breathe, Eric Gardner, choked. Sell, Lucy's. Resist, to death. Stare, Lamont Hunt, shot, back of head. Make, Akul Gurley, a jarring sound, shot accidentally. Stand, Amadou Diallo in vestibule after walking. Carry, wallet. Loiter, shot. Look, out of place, 41 fired. Act, suspicious, 19 bullets hit. Walk, Terrence Crutcher, hands in air. Appear, intoxicated. Have a very hollow look, shot in back. Drive, Samuel Dubose, without license plate, shot in head. Drive, LeVar Jones, without seatbelt. Reach for driver's license, shot. Drive, Sean Reed, while live streaming. Run, shot. Run, shot while streaming. Drive, Walter Scott with broken tail light, shot in back. Reverse, Deontay Yabber suddenly behind Will, 30 bullets fired, 10 kill. Park, Tanya Haggerty on side of road. Talk, on cell on side of road. Shot, on side of road. Drive, Philando Castile with broken brake lights. Carry, legal firearm. Tell, you have a gun. Shout, not reaching for gun. Shot, 5 bullets, 2 to heart. Sit, Donta Dawson, quietly, in car, engine, idling. Raise, left hand, abruptly, shot in eye. Evade, Michael Dean, shot in temple at traffic light. Crawl, Daniel Shaver, toward officers as instructed. Pull, loose gym shorts too suddenly. Beg not to be shot, shot anyway. Approach, Oscar Grant, the police. Beg not to shoot. Kneel, shot anyway, in back. Fail, Sandra Bland, to signal, too uppity. Arrested, found hanging in cell. Carry, Tamir Wright's toy gun, shot near navel. Carry, Cameron Tillman, iPhone in the dark, BB gun in hand, shot with real bullets. Carry, humane Brisbane, prescription bottle, shot, 2 bullets to torso. Carry, LaQuart McDonald, knife in the middle of the road, shot, 16 bullets. Carry, Sean Metarosa, hammer, shot, 5 bullets fired, 1 in back. Carry, Miles Hall, a 5-foot metal gardening rod. Behave erratically. Have schizoaffective disorder, shot. Carry, Stephen DeMarco Taylor, baseball bat, shot. Have a manic episode, shot at Walmart. Not carry, Keith Lamont Scott, a gun, when told to drop it. B, Michael Brown Jr., too large, same height as shooter, shot, 6 bullets, 2 to head. B, John Crawford, an imminent threat. Shop, carry, Walt. B, John Crawford, an imminent threat. Shop, carry Walmart air rifle. Talk on cell phone while shopping. Shot with real bullets. B, Tony McCabe, a suspect. Move, consistent with using a firearm. Shot. B, Terrence Franklin, a suspect. Shot, 5 bullets to head. Talk on cell phone while shopping. Shot with real bullets. Pose, Ezell Ford, an imminent threat. Shot while schizophrenic. Display, Manuel Logan Jr., a mean expression. Shot in front of daughters. Call, Chelina Lyles, the police, while mentally ill. Shot, 7 bullets. Fit, Jordan Baker, the description. Shot. Flee, Freddie Gray, unprovoked, spine severed in custody. Run, Stephen Clark, through grandmother's yard. Carry, cell phone, shot, 20 bullets fired, 6 hit primarily in back. Run, Chinedu Okabe, Chinedu Okabe, in traffic, unarmed, taser to death. Run, Walter Scott, shot in back. Jog, Ahmaud Arbery, shot, 2 shotgun bullets while chased. Play, Atiana Jefferson, call of duty in bedroom, 8-year-old Zion watching, shot. Sleep, Ayanna Jones, 1 bullet to 7-year-old head on couch. Sleep, Breonna Taylor, shot, 8 bullets in bed. Sleep, Rashad Brooks, night before daughter's birthday, 8-year-old birthday. Flee, unarmed, shot, 2 bullets in back. Breathe. So that poem is unfinished, unfortunately. I will continue to write that poem. And by the way, you can find this poem in its entirety next month. The Poet Laureate, San Francisco's 7th Poet Laureate, Kim Shuck, will be publishing the poem as a poem of the day sometime in July. And I also plan to create a blog where the entire poem will appear with these unfortunate updates. And I want
Kim
to now—
is here tonight, just so you know.
Who's that?
Kim is
Oh, hi,
here
Kim.
tonight listening to you.
Hi, Kim. I want to now share a few poems from the anthology. And I like to use Elizabeth Alexander's pages to illustrate the format of the anthology. So we can move to that page. Many of you probably know Elizabeth from when she read the inaugurational poem for Barack Obama. And I'm going to read a few stanzas from her poem, but first I just want to use it as a sample of what we did with the poetry in the book. So every page, every poet has a portrait that was shot by the same photographer, and Victoria Smith in this case. And the other page facing the photograph is what I call the I statement. Each poet wrote a 500-word at most biographical bio of why they became a poet, why they continue to write a poet, and what that means in the context of this book. And this book, if you can move to the next page now, this book, because of the size of it, it's an oversized coffee table sized book. It could actually publish long poems. So many of the poems are long, and often that's an issue in anthologies. So this is Elizabeth Alexander's poem, Narrative Ali, a poem in 12 rounds. So there's a stanza for each round. And this next page shows another aspect of this book, and that is that there are archival images that are also used throughout the book. So I'm going to just share a few stanzas from Elizabeth's poem. And Narrative Ali, a poem in 12 rounds. 1, my head so big they have to pry me out. I'm sorry, Bird is what I call my mother, Cassius Marcellus Clay, Muhammad Ali. You can say my name in any language, any continent, Ali. 2, 2 photographs of Emmett Till, born my year on my birthday. One, he's smiling, happy, and the other one is after. His mother did the bold thing, kept the casket open, made the thousands look up on his bulging eyes, his twisted neck. He lynched her lynched black boy. I couldn't sleep for thinking Emmett Till. One day I went down to the train tracks, found some iron shoeshine rests and planted them between the tiles and waited for a train to come and watched the train derail and ran. And after that, I slept at night. 3, I need to train around people, hear them talk back. I need to hear the traffic, see people in the barber shop, people getting shoe shines, talking, hear them talk back. 4, bottom line, Olympic gold can't buy a black man a Louisville hamburger in 1960. Wasn't even real gold. I watched the river drag the ribbon down, red, white, and blue. And the 12th stanza reads, they called me the fistic pariah. They said I didn't love my country, called me a race hater, called me out of my name, waited for me to come out on a stretcher, shot at me, hexed me, cursed me, wished me all manner of ill will, told me I was finished. Here I am, like the song says, come and take me, the people's champ, myself, Muhammad. And this kind of makes me think of how sometimes the country lags so far behind of the moment that we are at historically. So Muhammad Ali was a pariah, and he became adored when he's referenced today. You know, we see the same thing happening with Colin Kaepernick, right? Where the NFL has had to kind of come out, even though they did not mention his name. They had to catch up to where he's been. And we see the same thing with Black Lives Movement. I think you remember that Black Lives Movement was being referred to as terrorists, right? And so look at the mass movement that we see that was largely spurred by that movement. The next 2 poets that are in the book are Amiri Baraka and Rhonda Coleman. So we can advance to the next slide, which is a slide of Rhonda Coleman. Both Amiri Baraka and Rhonda Coleman passed away before the publication date of the book. And Rhonda's poem, Emmett Till, is one of my favorite, and I'm also going to read a few stanzas for that. But before I do it, I just want to, again, give a little bit of story behind these images. You'll notice that I think there's only 2 of the poets who have 2 photographs in the book. Most of them, there's just 1 image. And the reason that happened is because we worked very hard with these wonderful images to have a real distinction, not just of the image itself, obviously, but that the flow was where every page had a distinct image to it, not just an image, but a distinct kind of flavor and meaning. And so originally, there was just one image of Rhonda selected. I think ultimately there's 3 of them of her. And when her husband saw the image of her covering her face, he said, but she had such a beautiful face. So my solution was to use 2 images of her. And so that's how that, that combination came about. I'm gonna share with you a little bit of Wanda Coleman's Emmett Till. Emmett Till, 1. River Jordan run red. Rainfall pains the bottom acreage. Rain, black earth, blacker still. Blackness seeps in, seeps down. The mortal gravity of hate-inspired poverty, Jim Crow knit us. The Alabama, the Apalachicola, the Arkansas, the Aroostook, the Altamaha. Killing of 14-year-old stirs nation. There will be a public wake. Works its way underground, scarred landscape, baned by rage, sanctified waters flow, go forth. The Bighorn, the Brazos, along Rowan Valley, ways blue rapids, wear away rock. Flesh current quickly courses through the front page news, amber fills, purple mountains, muddies. The Chattahoochee, the Cheyenne, the Chippewa, the Cimarron, the Colorado, the Columbia, the Connecticut, the Cumberland, waftage. Spirit, uplift eyes, head, heart, imitation of breath, chest a heave, the grotesque swim up the sticks, level as rainwater coals into its floodplain, the Des Moines, blood river born. This next poem that I'm going to read also from the book is the poem by Reginald Harris. And his poem is called New Rules of the Road, and it unfortunately remains too relevant. And this poem is on page 85 of the book. New Rules of the Road. This book is, this particular poem, the image that faces it in the book is that image of, of Trayvon Martin that I showed earlier. New Rules of the Road. Make no sudden movements, like from your neighborhood to some place you don't belong. Keep your hands visible at all times above your head in these brand new handcuffs. Speak only when spoken to, or not at all. You have the right to silence. Have proper ID on you at all times. There is no right to travel. Reply only to the questions asked. You have nothing to say. We want to hear. Give the officer only the materials requested. You have nothing to show us. We want to see. Do not leave the vehicle unless told to. You have nothing. Go quietly when arrested. You are nothing. Do not resist. You are a thing. Do not run. You have no rights. Do not say you do not fit the profile. This is America. You are the profile. And that is Reggie Harris's poem. I just want to end. We're going to have a little bit of a conversation after this, but the next slide is really about what can be done. And this is not a comprehensive list. In fact, when I conduct workshops on the issue of police killings, I use this page as a prompt to generate and hear ideas of what actions can be taken by other people who are in the room. But I just wanted to share this because I'm committed to not only exposing, but also taking specific actions against the inhumanity, the criminality of a system that it's not just about a few bad apples, but a system that rewards, it benefits from this terror and perpetuates violence, especially against Black people. But this violence, these acts that are happening to Black people can happen to any of you. And that's something that is really critical to keep in mind. I think people are beginning to understand that, and that's why we're seeing the activity that we're seeing in the street. So please take a look at these potential actions and engage and help change this system that we're confronted with. And I think I'll just read a few of them. But one of them is to not only protest, but to support protests. And when you can again remember when this disruption of traffic was happening, for instance, in the Bay Area with Black Lives Matter, people get pushed out of shape by those moments of disruption. But we can see that this is what it takes to change. And so I want to encourage you to do whatever you can to support and to participate yourself. And there's some very kind of concrete actions like contacting your senators and representatives, staying on top of your local officials, this whole idea of restructuring what policing is really critical. And there's a bunch of manuals out there from places like Campaign Zero, Black Lives Matter, and ACLU on how to do. And so I want to encourage you to follow those. And lastly, this last slide is about the book. It was reprinted last year. The second printing took place after selling out the first. It was originally published in 2016 and republished in 2019. And I really want to ensure that the book remains available because unfortunately this issue is not going away. So I want to encourage you to check out the book, get copies, and let people know about it. It's available online. It's also available in independent bookstores. And even if they don't have it, you can ask them to order it. And I try to keep people updated on what's happening on this issue at my Facebook page of Poetry and Protest, and also on Twitter of Poetry and Protest. So thank you very much. I think Jackie might have a few questions for me.
Yeah, great. Wow, Michael, so powerful. You know, I got the book. Here, let me on-screen share here. If I can get that. There we go. Right. So what I wanted to say before we go that is that I got the book, and I know we have many people here on our call who are poets and who are out in the world reading at poetry readings. This is an amazing resource to bring with you and read a poem and get Michael's work out there, and these poets' work, important work out there that I believe poetry allows us to say the things that we have a hard time finding words for. And so this is one to keep on the shelf and bring to poetry readings and keep it alive. So my questions for you are, so go ahead and if you have questions for Michael, go ahead and put some in the chat and we'll try to get to some, but I'm just gonna just start with a couple. The first is, so this came out 2 years ago. This was published 2 years ago. Did you? 2016. So yeah, 4 years ago, and it started something like 8 or 9 years ago. You said about 3 years before it was actually published. Yeah. And did you think that this work would become more relevant than ever, even after it was published?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, unfortunately, I did, because this is a struggle that I've been fighting since childhood. It resonates with me. I was born the same year that Emmett Till was murdered. And my birthday was the day that George Floyd was murdered. So I have too many unfortunate coincidences, and I guess that's the point. Can they even be called coincidence? Growing up in San Francisco, I never forget, I had just graduated from high school. I was on my way to a new job. And not far from my house, I came to a bus stop. And I saw this, I came upon this police officer who had like a magnum in his hand, you know, like literally shaking and at the head of a kid. And I was pretty young because I graduated from high school at 17. So that kid was younger than me. And I intervened, you know, and at the time, this was this was in the street, particularly in Oakland. There were so many police killings, and the Black Panthers were passing out the Panther newspaper outside of my high school. So these are, unfortunately, this is an issue that has been with me my entire life. So yeah, it would be hard for me to say that I expect these things to decline. And they fluctuate from year to year. But just the fact that there is no national database on this information, you know, on these killings. So what I am enthused about is that it's becoming more of an issue that other parts of the population can not just identify with, but see the necessity of doing something about it. And I think people are beginning to understand that it's dangerous for them to have these type of situations where people can just be killed. The thing about my poem, What Not to Do, is that most of the things that are in there are mundane things. You know, that's why it's driving, it's walking, it's selling cigarettes. And so how can we live in a society where such basic things are leading to the death of people? And that's because there's a hell of a lot more behind it than the act. So.
Yeah, thank you for that. And do you, I'm wondering, because we've talked a lot about the politics of the poetry, and I'm wondering if you can talk about the poetry of the politics and what you noticed in terms of, like when you mentioned and you were reading your poems about the form and the poetics of it. I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on, as you were gathering this work, does it have a cohesive voice, or is there any comments you want to make on the poetry side of it?
Well, one of the things that is really critical to me, and that, you know, when you're doing a project like this, there's so many considerations. And one consideration for me, from my background, I grew up in San Francisco, but I kind of got my poetry organizer chops in Chicago. And one of the things that was really critical to what I was doing was, one, the diversity of not only the audience, but the diversity of the artists. And that didn't just mean diversity in the way you looked or where you grew up and your background and where you lived, but also a diversity in the way you created your art, you know. So I've always been really open to different forms. And that's one of the things I feel proud of about this book, is that it incorporates many different styles. There is no one Black poet style. And by the way, all the poets in the book are African American, with one exception, and that's because Kwame Das, for instance, has been here. He's so long, and but we had to make a decision at a certain point if there were going to be, if the entire African diaspora was going to be in this book, and which would have meant Black poets which is worldwide, as opposed to African American poets specific to this country. And really, because we were planning on doing 4 books, and this one was concentrating on the civil rights movement and the new civil rights movement. And so we decided, okay, since it's concentrating on civil rights, let's, kind of limit it to African American poets. But the other reason is you have to have some parameters with a big project like this, or it'll never get done.
Right. I mean, what strikes me is, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, so the thing about the poetics is that there is a diversity within these these writers, and that they it was really left open how they wanted to come at this theme. And you know, you'll notice that I happen to read some poems that directly reference Emmett Till, but most of them, you know, don't reference Emmett Till or Trayvon Martin.
Right. I mean, it feels like such an important work, and so I'm wondering if there is a, hopefully not the next volume in the future, but the volume prior to this, because there's so much work that of poetry and protest of poets prior to Emmett Till, right? Is there something like that or is this a project you've moved on from?
You mean in terms of another project for me?
Another volume, the volume
Yeah.
that comes before this one.
Yeah. Well, I am actually looking forward to putting together a digital site that not only takes what's in this book, but opens up for other creative work on the theme of justice, and is not only literature, but also is all forms of art that can be expressed digitally. And so that's something that I'm actually working on right now and trying to get support for, and thinking in terms of a portal. But leading up to this, there are just so many books that have covered this theme. If you look up poetry and protest, you'll just like tons of things will come up on the screen. I think that this book has its own specific kind of presentation, and the combination of the art and the graphic design and in poetry and the archival materials and the individual biographical statements. And I think that the essay in here by Amiri Baraka was his, you know, one of his last, if not his last, essay.
And so thanks for that. We were talking about your portal actually is a great segue into a question from Eric, who asks, does the description documentary poetry, which is analogous to documentary film in the sense of working with or producing historical documentation, apply to your poem, What Not to Do, and to the Muhammad Ali poem, or do you reject the genre designation?
I don't reject that genre. I don't know much about it actually, but I worked as a foreign correspondent in Ethiopia for 5 years. I worked for the BBC, the Manchester Guardian, and I always one of the things about that particular poem is that the journalist in me is in that poem. And I also have always found that one of my greatest influences as a poet is film and documentary. And my mind works with images. And so that particular poem, the reason it's extremely experimental for me, and I had to kind of create this form for it, is because it's not the way I normally write. It's dramatically different from the way I normally write. I don't really have another poem like that. And like I said, when I started it, it didn't matter to me if it was a poem or not. And so I love what documentaries do and the power of documentaries. And I like to see an interrelationship and influence between these different forms of art and humanities. And my own work is very much influenced by both film and documentary. So I don't think I would be turned off by that terminology, but I wouldn't mind knowing more about it.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you. We have another question, and then we'll probably move into our open mic, which is, what are the challenges you might have come across as a poet during your writing while using poetry as a tool of protest? What are some challenges that you came across? It sounds like.
Yeah, for me personally, for me personally, I always feel that the most difficult creative work, particularly with poetry, to kind of set above what I call pedestrian language. Pedestrian language is really critical, otherwise we wouldn't be able to communicate with each other and get from point A to point B. But poetry is not about being pedestrian unless that is your intent, right? And that is one way that you choose which words you use in the poem. So for me, the poems that are most difficult to write, because so much of it has been written, that is difficult to stand out are love poems, just like love songs, and political poems, just like political songs. It's it really is hard. It's difficult to take the creative aspect of what you're doing and mixing it with the message of what you're doing and creating something that is art. That's not an easy thing to do. And I just see myself constantly struggling to do it. It's what has motivated me since I was a child. But I do think that it's a very, I do see it as a serious challenge every time I start to write anything, but particularly a poem that's trying to address an issue. And I really have pretty much, I could write a poem about anything, but I have pretty much dedicated myself to writing poetry that's addressing issues and what challenges we face.
Yeah. Well, it reminds me what you and I were talking about earlier today, which is the other part of that Kwame Dawes passage that I read, which is that all of us, whatever we write during this time, are writing political poems. Because what Kwame Dawes says is, I think that a poet who writes love poems in the middle of a war is a political poet. So did you want to say any last things before we go to our open mic?
I agree with Kwame.
And that's a political statement. Thank you, Michael. I'll come back again to say thank you if you can stick with us. And then, great.
I'm gonna.
Awesome. So D. Allen, you're up.
Oh, D. Allen.
Hey, what's up, Michael?
Hey, D. How's it going?
I'm sorry I missed out on you. I'm sorry I missed out on your performance.
Okay.
I just left. I just left another Zoom meeting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're all in Zoom these days. It'll be on Kim Shuck's Poem a Day next month, so you'll get a chance to see it then or hear.
Congratulations on that.
Thanks. So you're going to share something with us?
Go ahead and kick us off, D.
Yeah, and the camera refuses to work.
That's okay. We see your name and we hear your words.
All right. I have about 2 pieces for tonight, and they are timely for this racially intense national moment that we're in.
Dee, would you mind if I request to do one, because we have about 10 or 11 people and I try to keep us to 8:30. Would that be okay with you?
Yeah, I'm okay with that. I'll do one.
Okay, thank you. And we'll come back if we have time. How does that sound?
All right.
Take it away.
All right, this is a new poem called Minneapolis Week. Most Black men in the USA have an oppressor's leather boot applied to their necks. George Floyd died untimely with the knee of police oppression on his. George Floyd complained of the knee's pressure restricting his oxygen. He couldn't breathe, we couldn't breathe. Derek Chauvin never respected the life he detained with his leg. His partner watched, took notes on how lynching's done. George Floyd died on a Monday from another's power madness. George Floyd was avenged on a Thursday with fire. Derek Chauvin has plenty to answer for. One cop's career for one defenseless Black life, a well-deserved gift from karma. The only good cop shop existing is the one laying in ashes. And that was a new poem called Minneapolis Week for George Floyd, 1973 to 2020. Rest in peace. From this computer mic to your ears, I'm D. Allen. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Dee. Next, we have Phil Harris.
We've all been discussing everything we write is autobiographical, no matter how we try to place it, or I think what I have is maybe more in line with Jacki's opening of never having to celebrate Pride Month or Black History Month or Women's History Month or Native History, because we just live it all the time. My poem is called If We Fail, also read the reason, but who will we be if we fail to remember the evil we have committed over time? That's not us, we say, but we're wrong. Angry mob descended from kidnappers, angry mob descended from murderers, a people who thought slavery their due, a people who knew genocide their right, a people who turn a blind eye because they will not admit their fear and guilt. Not all of us will take the streets, even though some people label us cowards. How can we explain our health, our fear, to a 75-year-old with a fractured skull? To men who died saying, I can't breathe, to women who were shot in their bed, to all who fear to walk down the street, any routine traffic stop, going outside. Who will we be if we fail to remember? Ours ever the history of masters, bosses, with whips and chains and no deterrent, to rape at will and kill without reason, to attest that we own you and control all aspects of your life, now, forever. Despite so-called emancipation, rights offered which should have been yours because you're a member of humanity, so hatred and discrimination continue. Who will we be if we fail to remember the evil we have committed over time? These crimes are still ours when we fail to raise our voice, fail to raise children to know that all people are only one race, to fail to call murder, murder each time, to fail to see racism as racism, because it is who we are if we fail to remember.
What if we fail? Thank you, Phil.
Dude, that was deep and it was necessary. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Christine, are you here? I don't see anyone whose name is Christine, but I'm wondering if you're here under another name. If so, chat me in the box there. Otherwise, we'll go to Jim.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Hi, Jim. We can hear you. Welcome. Thank you
Okay.
for reading.
Yeah, we can hear you just fine.
Okay. I was having a problem with my iPad here. Okay. I have a poem here called Justice with No Lie. It's not mine, sorry. But Dave Walker wrote it a few years ago. So, Justice with No Lie. An innocent man lies his head down to rest, not wanting to wake to the morning sun, instead wanting to wake in a parallel universe where truth and justice is number one. In the real world, his days seem like years. They eat away at his mind, body, and soul. If a witness would lie, he knows he might die before truth and justice would see the light, but he's got to keep up the fight. All he wants is justice with no lie. So come forward and let truth and justice shine its light.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you. Let it shine. Next, we have Luke
Cassidy?
Cassidy.
That's okay, Jackie.
I'll get it the third time's a charm.
Okay. I have this poem that's dedicated to all the warrior women for this time and for any time. It's called Warrior Woman. Warrior woman, you always hit the mark, whether in war or love, from the bow of your determination. Your arrow is shot from your sharp eyes connected to an unerring and heroic heart you never miss. In war, you are Athena. You focus your fierce determination and release your deadly spear, which strikes the soul of your pathetic and helpless enemy, who falls without mercy into infinity. In love, you are Cupid, firing arrows of affection which strike silently without warning the locked door to emotion, releasing an unstoppable waterfall of surrender. Warrior woman, you are deadly indeed. Whether it is love or war, you always win. Your opponent will always lose, which is why you are so feared, which is why you are so loved. That's all.
Oh, thank you so much, Luke, and I'm glad you could join us this evening. Thank you. I accept your words. Next, we have Phyllis Klein.
Hi, can you hear me? So this poem is called Lord of Song, with apologies to Leonard Cohen. Leonard, lucky you missed this, left us just as the music took its minor slip. You missed this ugly, damaged time, when faith, they say, is strong, but tied up to a dining room chair. No need to cut any Samson's hair. It's all handcuffs and thrones now. It's all fear and hate, lies and cries. The victors march across our stage, but what's really going on below, they never show us, do they? And what's this faith, this Lord of Song? Is he watching now? Is he even there as innocents go down to the valley of their shadows? And who remembers dear Anne Frank, Trayvon Martin, Emmett Till, the best among us, flanked by tears, not coming back, and still the deaths continue. What's important now? Your shade of skin, the soldier, how you stand your ground. Keep the other out, they shout and shout. Make sure the bathroom door stays shut. Take back what's been won. Keep your gun. It's a frigid and a fractured hallelujah.
Wow, Phyllis, thank you. It is fractured. Thank you. Next we have Ed. Mike, are you here? Yep.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, hi.
Okay. This is titled Acts of Self-Definition and the Real Story. Quoted, two quotes at first. One, civil marriage is at once a deeply personal commitment to another human being and a highly public celebration of the ideals of mutuality, companionship, intimacy, fidelity, and family. It is an association that promotes a way of life, not causes, a harmony in living, not political faiths, a bilateral loyalty, not commercial or social projects. That was from Griswold versus Connecticut, 1965. Second quote, because it fulfills yearnings for security, safe haven, and connection that expresses our common humanity. Civil marriage is an esteemed institution, and the decision whether and whom to marry is among life's momentous acts of self-definition. That one was from the Massachusetts Supreme Court judicial ruling on homosexual marriage, released November the 18th, 2003. The real story is how the excluded or ignored come forward. Identities emerging, doors closed, open. The real story is facts, along with comedic theatrical certainties. Anthony and Cleopatra, and David and Jonathan exchanging clothes through lands of both should and might. The real story is how the excluded or ignored come forward, the mundane, ecstatic, quotidian daily duties and tasks, as if bubbles of ancient air are alive in glaciers. The real story is when you see or hear, you know it, whether knocking, barking up wrong trees in common wrong places. The real story is how the excluded or ignored come forward in the alphabet of vocabularies ordinarily writing any self, even from a making nothing happen queer, witnessing from life. The real story is how the excluded or ignored come forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you. Let them come forward. Thank you. And next is Eric, aka Disclaimer.
So this is some pieces from a work in progress called Provocations and Incitements. Hands in his pocket, posing casually for a portrait of murder. The spring that wasn't. Face masks, sweating bodies, when the air was hostile. Amps blast, fuck the police, through the neighborhood. A girl, smiling, takes pictures. 6 feet away, a cannon aimed, ready to fire. Tear gas miasma. Superhuman God answers less lethal prayers. Just divinity. A thunderless storm, several lightning strikes at the taser factory. Flashbang, warehouse, goes the way of poorly managed barn of fireworks. Tear gas miasma in the manufacturer's corporate office.
Wow. Powerful. Thank you so much, Eric, for bringing a work in progress. That's amazing. Thank you. Diane, Mumi, you're up next.
There, I just unmuted myself. This poem is an offering, and I chose the form because the repetition makes it feel like a prayer wheel. Pantoum for George and Emmett. The days you died, you shook the house. It split from roof to cellar. The wind blew in, the rain blew in. Our cheeks were wet for days. It split from roof to cellar. Your mother wails, your sisters pray. Our cheeks are wet for weeks. We cannot hear our speech because our daughters wail, our fathers pray. Such a noise of water, we cry too loud to hear our speech. Your brothers crowd around you. Noise of wind and water, snapping banners, marching feet, your brothers rage around you. All rented rooms are swept away. Screaming banners, marching feet, our cheeks are wet for years. Rented rooms are swept away when hurricanes touch land. Our cheeks are wet forever. The days you died, you shook our house. When hurricanes touch land, the wind blows in, the rain blows in.
Diane, thank you. Obviously a fresh work there. Thanks for bringing it to us. Myrna Herschel.
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay. Just one small note. In this poem that I will read to you, I mention Eisenstein not Einstein. Eisenstein was a very famous cinematographer, a director of a movie, Battleship Potemkin, that illuminated what lies below a revolution, what brings it on, in a way that millions of words never could. So that's the mention. A glimmer of hope in a nightmare. In this pitch black night, I suffocate in the folds of a loud, menacing cloud, hiding behind lawyers' gowns, swishing in arguments. The politicians keep plotting and scheming. A heavy hand of time weighs on my shoulder. A storm is gathering, the simple folk despairing. Stop squabbling, you rulers, rich, mighty, and crafty. Heed the seething mob below. Can you not foresee an avalanche of anger rising out of those numberless, nameless shoulders? Shudder, cushioned lives. Rewrite yourselves books of right and wrong. This ferment doesn't know of rules. Fear, you are justified to fill the hearts, make them race like rabbits. The horses will undomesticate themselves, the bison stampede over a desiccated earth, and let no child's cradle be in their way, for accidents know not of guilt. Oh, Eisenstein, we need you now to illuminate this foment. Record the silent screams before they are audible. Our nostrils stand obtuse by good life, can't smell anything, not the spreading fires, not even the stench of dead sea lions beached on the petroleum spilled black tarred beaches. Numbed, numb. How can we detect an odorless annihilation threat? It is almost morning. The light is seeping sheepishly into my room, shaken by a nightmare. Is that what it was? I dread to check the news, listen to bewildered grown-ups already resigned or about to resign. This time, it will take the youth to lift the world out of its demise. I will look for answers in my grandchildren's faces. How I long to see the sparks of elan in their clear eyes, a determination settle in the stubborn jawlines. I will listen to their naive but sincere political arguments, watch the future brighten in their youthful expressions. I think they will ripen well. In them only do I see the light. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Myrna. Thank you. We've had a couple people add in, so we'll have Chun Yu go next, please. Thank you.
Jackie, did you say me?
Chun Yu first, and
me?
then.
Do you see me?
Not yet. No, but I can see your name. There you are. We can see you. Hi.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for Jackie for a great event, and Michael and everybody, amazing reading. So I worked with Michael. Yeah, I work with Michael on a project called Two Languages, One Community. We bring African American and Chinese American communities together. We've been on it for 2 years, 3 years. Yeah, it's an amazing journey. So today I'm really honored to be here with everybody too. I'm gonna read a short poem called Syria. It's about an event. I saw a news clip on CNN of this old Syrian woman, and she lost so many of her family. And so I wrote this poem and actually read it to the great Syrian poet Odorless. I met him in China. So Syria. An old woman displays 6 shoes of her family members and hurries to rearrange their order according to perhaps generations, spouses, and their children. She moves with panic and speed in moments of hesitation and bursts of decisiveness. Each person has only one shoe. Even though ancient in age, with cloudy old eyes, blurry with tears, she knows that the camera lens of the world has no room for every foot of its debt. Like a con artist on the side of a busy street, or a business owner charged with extravagant advertisement fees, she tries to have the world buy her story. She has only seconds. Thank you.
I'm so delighted that you joined. When I saw your name, I did make that connection earlier. So I wanted to please you and thank you so much. The shoes. Wow. Thank you.
Thank
Hope
you.
to see you again.
Thank you.
Next, we have Lois Freed.
Thank you, Jackie. I'm going to share a poem that with everything that's going on, somehow or another, this poem just rose up again for me. I've been working on it for a while, and it's kind of about my life, but I could also have written it about my brother, which I probably will. It's called Black Beauty. From Black Gal to Black Beauty is a narrative that could fill pages. When grandfather would come for a visit, he would say, "Black gal, go and make your big daddy a cup of black coffee." To him, it was a term of endearment. To this little Black girl growing up in the South, hearing those words stuck in my head from midnight to dawn. I was a little Black girl who loved the skin I was born in. Couldn't they see my beauty, charm, and poise? They saw a little Black gal, a Black monkey, a Black thief, a Black widow spider. The 5 and dime cashier saw a little Black girl who is still, if left alone, in the toy section. I saw toys that lit up my eyes and brought a big smile to my eyes, to my face. I saw the best hula hoop, the cutest package of ball and jacks, boxes of crayon and many colors, and coloring books galore. The drugstore worker saw a little Black gal who probably smelled bad when she came in to buy 1 scoop of Spumoni ice cream. I saw more flavors of ice cream than I could imagine. I needed to take some time to pick the best one. The front desk clerk at the local clinic saw a little Black gal carrying a disease that she might take home to her beautiful little white blue-eyed kids. I saw an office of grown-up, scary-looking people who were about to stick and poke me into a painful afternoon. The hostess in the local diner downtown saw a little Black gal with money for a sandwich, but not good enough to order at the counter, and sent me to the back door. I savored the smell of a grilled cheese sandwich and French fries that would go very well with my cold soda pop. I loved my tawny bronze skin, which turned a few shades darker in the summertime. My dark skin made my eyes brighter, my teeth whiter, and my kinky hair shinier. Big Daddy, I morphed from a little black gal to a beautiful black woman. Everything that makes me black and beautiful comes from inside, where flowers grow and the bees leave their nectar. And at the end of the day, the most beautiful sunset of colors. Look past the color of my skin, and deep inside of me, you will see love, resilience, patience, dreams, hope, faith, laughter, joy, and forgiveness, and sadness. Sadness for the white people who still will never know me. Thank you.
Lois, thank you so much. This is a side of your poetry that we haven't seen yet, and I really hope to see more. Thank you.
Thank you.
Monica Corday.
Hi, Jackie. Thank you so much. I hope all of you can hear me fine.
Yeah, we can hear you just fine.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to be here tonight. Thanks, Jackie, for introducing us to a poet like Michael. Thank you so much, Michael, for sharing all those remarkable poems and your voice, lending your voice to all of them. It was a brilliant evening, and thanks everyone as well. I will share a poem tonight that's a couple of you might have heard it. I recently read it at one of the other open mics as well. However, I think it's timely, so I would love to share it again. And it is in response to the act of taking a knee and the whole idea behind it, how simple it is. It is called To Rise, and it starts with a quote. There are 1,000 ways to kneel and kiss the ground. There are 1,000 ways to go home again. By Rumi. We kneel before kings and queens. We kneel before gods. We kneel before altars and tombs. We kneel to hold a child into an embrace. We kneel to show respect, to pray, to plead. We kneel in joy, in grief. We kneel to ask someone to marry. We kneel to give someone a CPR. We kneel to ask for forgiveness. We kneel to show gratitude. If kneeling is not enough, we need to lean, arc our bodies towards the light, become a Venus thistle. The ire, the cry, the raised fists, we must remember. We must pick up the broken pieces before we move on. The side of the moon facing away from the earth will always be known as the dark side. That is not where we are, but it exists. This too we must remember. We may not know each other, but every story is ours. We may not sing the same songs, but every song is ours. We may not sing the same songs, but every song is ours. We kneel to weed the garden. We kneel to sow new seeds. Sycamore, dogwood, oak. Timeless, persistent. They first grow down into earth, then bend towards the light. They all know how to rise. Sometimes we kneel not to make ourselves smaller. Sometimes we kneel to find our way home. Thank you so much.
Monica, thank you for all those ways of kneeling. So we have one more reader, if I haven't missed anyone, which is Tanu Wakefield. And my gratitude to Tanu, because she's the one who started Belmont Poetry Night as our my predecessor as the Poet Laureate for Belmont.
Hi, Jackie. Hi, everybody. This is just so moving and beautiful poems. And sorry, I'm not showing my video, but I'm just very moved. I just thought I would share a poem by Lucille Clifton that has been resonating with me through everything that's been going on. It was written in 1989, and when you hear it, you'll be struck by how it speaks to the moment right now very powerfully. It's called The Lost Women. I need to know their names, those women I would have walked with jauntily, the way men go in groups, swinging their arms, and those sweating women whom I would have joined after a hard game to chew the fat. What would we have called each other, laughing, joking into our beer? Where are my gangs, my teams, my mislaid sisters? All the women who could have known me, where in the world are their names? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that last word of our open mic. I want to thank you all for being here. I think this is actually part of the work that we're all doing, which is to gather together around these words and also to support the poets and artists who are the ones we need at this time. I'd like to invite you to email me, Jacki @Woman Uprising. It's also in the event or the email, however you found yourself here. Let me know if you'd like to be on my list, and I'll let you know of our upcoming Belmont Poetry Nights. We meet, if you missed at the beginning, on the third Tuesday of the month, normally at the Belmont Library, but now on Zoom until further notice. Thank you for joining in solidarity with me. And I'd like to thank especially Michael Warr, because he told me that he doesn't know, he declines a lot of invites to read it. So I feel really honored and privileged to have him here tonight. And so I'd like to give you the final word, Michael.
The final word being a word or a poem?
Whatever moves you.
Okay. I will end with a short, for me, short poem in the spirit of survival. And it's called Hallucinating at the Velvet Lounge, and how art helps us survive. It's to Malachi Thompson, a trumpet player that I knew in New York, who's no longer with us, but his music is still with us. And this is one of my poems that actually has also been translated into Chinese by Cheng Yu. Believe it or not, wait when you hear it. It's called Hallucinating at the Velvet Lounge. When Malachi blew his horn, I dreamed of cornbread. Yellow mounds with burnt edges on the velvet's culinary altar. His sharp cut riffs morphed into squares of cornbread islands, floating in streams of warm butter, clinging to the ribs of my memory, speaking in trumpet tongues of passages and uprisings, ancient pain and good time jiving, sacred beats and blues timing, drive-by crying and signifying, an opiate inside of oppression, a cratered chunk of bacon infused, sweet potato, chicken smothered, maple pecan, custard filled, smackling, crackling, jalapeno inflamed, cornbread. The crepe of the slaves now sold at Whole Foods in this jazz-drenched town built of golden bricks and smokestacks, billowing fumes of corn on the cob and catfish, my mind lost in music and metaphysics, reminiscing the Sunday manna served beside my mother's succotash. Thank you.